following truth, not what we've been told. Searching your word for what is written, what you spoke. Following truth, Jesus, lead us in your light. Following truth, every page comes alive tonight.
Hello and welcome to Following Truth. As always, I am your host, LJ. Tonight's topic is going to be something different than what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. We're going to do something on textual criticism tonight. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm coming back to doing these in the StreamYard. I'm struggling to get StreamYard to work properly for some reason, but hopefully people can hear me. So if you could let me know, Freddie, I know you're in the comments. If you could let me know if you can hear me right now, that would be awesome. So, as I say, we're going to be doing something slightly different today. We're going to do something on textual criticism. Now, this is a topic that is that I'm very interested in. I love textual criticism, but what I have seen in recent debates, there's a lot of debates going on at the moment. It seems to be a very popular thing to do at the moment, is to debate different topics on all different types of Christianity and actually religion in general. I see a lot of debates between Christians and Muslims and even atheists. But then there's also debates on different topics of eschatology, the Trinity and the oneness and Unitarian positions. There's lots of debates going on at the moment. And one of the things that I often see being used by the debaters, by the people taking part in these debates, is textual criticism when they are trying to make their point, make their argument. They will often point to or appeal to different portions of textual criticism. So you'll often see somebody say, "Oh, the reading of this verse," or the reading of this verse, and then there'll be a kind of discussion or a side debate on what is the correct reading of that particular verse. And we see this in the debates with Muslims. They're using it against Christians, saying, there's corruptions within the biblical text, and what is the correct reading of a particular verse. And I see it, like say, specifically in the Unitarian Trinitarian debates. They will point to a certain verse and then they will appeal to that reading. And what I actually see a lot of is selective textual criticism. So you'll see that often the same arguments are presented, but they are reversed, and sometimes the appeal to the textual critic reading, the reading in any particular verse is often used along with the oldest and best manuscripts, or scholars agree, scholars believe. But then those same arguments are used or rejected in another place when that reading kind of doesn't really align with the person's beliefs. So what you'll see is, as I say, I think it's a lot of selective textual criticism. You'll see people change. And so this also, to a degree, but we're not going to go so much into it tonight, works with the versions as well. So you'll see somebody quote from an ASV in one verse, but then when they quote the Bible in another verse, it's the NIV that they're using, or the ESV. And this changes because that reading in that particular version suits their particular assertion better. And what I think this is it needs to be addressed, because I think that there are problems with this. I'm going to say errors with this, but I think there's issues with the methodology being put forward by these people using these arguments. So we're going to have a look at some of it tonight. I'm not going to go massively into textual criticism. Just I want to kind of highlight this issue that I see within the debate world at the moment. And actually, I'm going to do something slightly different tonight as well. I'm actually going to allow people to come on to the live stream at the end of the presentation. If you want to come on and discuss with me, that's textual criticism. So it has to be on the particular topic. If you would like to come up and ask a question, or you have something that you would like to say on the textual criticism, or you disagree with something that I say, feel free to come up. It has to stay on topic. It is going to be about textual criticism, and that's all we're going to discuss tonight. We're not going to look at anything else apart from textual criticism. So if you want to do that, feel free. I'm also going to address questions in the chat. So if somebody has a question, feel free to bring it up, and I will kind of address it. Again, as long as it's on topic, I'm happy to do that. In this particular, it's not so much of a study, this one. I just want to bring to light what is happening, and the issues and problems that actually this selective textual criticism brings to the actual debate itself. And actually, I think that it reduces the credibility of the people that are making these arguments, unfortunately, because I think a lot of these people who are engaging in these debates don't really understand textual criticism at all. They don't know what's going on behind the scenes with it, and sometimes you'll see them appeal to scholars. They will appeal to all the oldest and best manuscripts, but then they reject those without probably even realizing that's what they're doing in other places when they use it. And I don't necessarily think that they know what the oldest and supposedly best manuscripts are. And you'll hear all the time, the modern scholars say, or you'll hear the oldest and best Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus. But do they really understand what these manuscripts are, where they're from, the textual line, the textus receptus and the critical text, what the differences are, where they come from, how they were produced? I often see lots of claims about, Erasmus, and a lot of things that are said about Erasmus, or the King James Bible comes from the Latin Vulgate. These are arguments that are put forward, but the reality is very different than a lot of these things that you'll actually hear people making claims to. So today we're just going to have a look at some of these issues, and I just really want to address it a little bit more. So we're going to look at the misuse of textual criticism, and I think that this is, for me, like I say, is an important part of debates and understanding what textual criticism is, if you're going to engage in using it within a debate. So let me bring up these slides. I haven't really got too many slides today because, like I say, I just want to kind of engage with what is going on within the textual criticism world and the debate world. And I think that there's a big disconnect between these two kind of areas, and the apologists are not really understanding the textual criticism side. So we're going to look at when scholarship becomes a buffet. Okay, the textus receptus is the TR. This is the line of that, or the Greek text that kind of underlies the King James Bible and all of those prior to it, the Geneva Bible, the Bishop's Bible, the Great Bible, you know, the Tyndale, the Coverdale, these ones prior to it. But then we also have the modern critical text. Now, this is the Nestle-Aland and the United Bible Society, UBS. They've kind of merged now, and they're producing one critical text, and it's now in the 29th edition. So it changes slightly in each edition. There are differences in one edition from another. Then you'll see readings of different verses or a word in a verse that changes. So this is something that is an ongoing thing with the modern critical text. It changes, and you'll see that eventually they will bring out the Nestle-Aland 30, the UBS 7, and that will change slightly from the Nestle-Aland 29 UBS 6, which is different than the Nestle-Aland 28 UBS 5. But these are not two options, okay? They are two frameworks of the way that the text is understood. But they're not. What's not happening is we're not being given two options, all right, for you to just choose from. So many apologists, what they will do is they will treat textual criticism as if it is a buffet, and they can just select whichever reading or manuscript tradition or scholarly conclusion that best supports their theological position in any given verse, while ignoring or even rejecting that same principle that led to the reading being asserted as original that they are appealing to in one particular verse. And they would reject that elsewhere when that reading becomes inconvenient. Now, this is not the use of textual criticism, it is the misuse of textual criticism. Textual criticism is a historical discipline. It seeks to reconstruct as carefully as possible and consistently as possible the earliest attainable form of the biblical text. And as I say, there are two main textual traditions. There are more, but there are two main ones, the textus receptus and the critical text. Now, in discussions of New Testament textual variants, much confusion arises because readers are often unaware of that different editions of the Greek text exist. I think more nowadays we are aware that there are these two textual lines, the textus receptus and the modern critical text, but they represent different approaches to textual transmission and evaluation. Now, a person, let me move to my next slide. Let me just address this. So what do apologists do? They cite the textus receptus in one verse, They appeal to the critical text in another. They invoke the Septuagint when useful, but they then default to the Masoretic text when also necessary. Quote the oldest and best manuscripts as a rhetorical device, all without articulating a consistent textual methodology. But textual criticism doesn't do this. All right, they engage in textual methodology when they are putting forward, an argument or the evidence for a certain reading. It isn't just, oh, okay, well, this reading best suits our theological position, so this is the reading that we're going to go with. There are, within modern textual criticism, many different rules of how they come together to bring why they understand a particular reading in a particular verse. But it isn't simply, well, this one suits and this one doesn't, so we'll go with this one. And when you are looking at the textual criticism, and you see a difference in the textus receptus and from the critical text, what you have is two separate, different readings from different manuscript traditions, or you've got there are different ways that come about, the internal evidence for a reading, the patristic evidence for a reading. Then you've got versional evidence, such as the Coptic, the Egyptian, the Ethiopic. Then you've got the Egyptian line, the Alexandrian line of manuscripts. You've got the Byzantine manuscripts. You've got the Western, the Latin Vulgate, and all of this. So when they're analyzing the reading, they are looking at all of this, and they're not just going, we're just going to pick this one because it suits. So when somebody picks a verse or a reading from the textus receptus, that is different than you find in the critical text. But then later on, they'll swap that and they'll pick the reading that comes in the critical text. If they're not engaging in textual criticism anymore, they are utilizing textual criticism as if what they get to do is they get two options and they get to pick them. But that is not what textual criticism is about. Yes, there may be two readings, but the critical text is saying this is the correct reading, and the textus receptus says that this is the correct reading. Now, you can do an eclectic. There are people that utilize eclectic readings of taking from the textus receptus and critical text, but they are themselves engaging in critical textual criticism, and they have their own methodology. I can't say this word. In order to bring about why they are selecting from the textus receptus here and why they are from the critical text here. It's not just arbitrary. There is a method behind it. And these are scholars that do that. But they're not, again, just going, well, the textus receptus for reading best suits. They are looking at the evidence and going and producing their reading for this and their understanding. And it is normally consistent based on why they are selecting that particular reading. You don't just get to pick and choose when that suits you. So when the criteria change with the conclusion, the argument is no longer text critical. It is theological preference dressed in scholarly language. So when somebody does this and just picks and chooses which one they're going to select, it is a theological preference. they're using the scholarly language and saying that, they're trying to appeal to the best and oldest or scholars, but really they're just choosing a theological preference. Textual criticism is, as I say, a historical discipline. It is not a theological toolbox for you to pick and choose. You have to have understanding, and you have to kind of know why you are using that verse and why you are or that particular reading, and saying, oh well, I believe it to be correct in the Textus Receptus or in the critical text. There needs to be more to it than, oh well, this one suits my theological belief. Now, it is true that most contemporary textual scholars regard the modern critical text. The most versions of the Bible are modern versions are now really on the Nestle-Aland 28 UBS 5. They might still, some of them, be on the 27 UBS 4. It's only the Nestle-Aland 29 UBS 6 is quite a new, relatively new release. You might start seeing modern versions of the Bible with new updates start utilizing the readings that you'll find in this new text that is being released. But it is fair to say that the critical text is the text that most scholars or contemporary textual scholars accept as being the authoritative earliest witness to the original. I don't hold to that. I do hold to a Textus Receptus position, but that at this moment is irrelevant to where we are and what we're discussing. But so your modern versions of the Bible, your NIV, the ESV, NASB, the Net Bible, the ISV, there's many versions of the Bible that you'll find are all based on this modern critical text. Now, this modern critical text dates really back to the 1880s. That's when it really starts with Westcott and Hort. The outbreak of the change. It starts then. It takes a while before it really takes off, but yeah, it's kind of starts back then. Now the Textus Receptus goes all the way back to Erasmus in the 16th century. So we do have, but then there's lineage back prior to that, which we won't go into. But that is the Textus Receptus is based on the text that Erasmus kind of started, and then you get the Westcott and Hort text, which comes into the Nestle-Aland text and the critical text that you'll see. Now, the King James Bible is based on the Textus Receptus, and all previous Bibles to that are based upon the Textus Receptus, the English Bibles prior to that, back to the Tyndale Bible. So all of those would be based upon the Textus Receptus. So trying to just give you a little bit of information of what your Bibles are based upon, and why people will kind of say that the King James Bible is kind of an outdated. We have more updated critical text now. Now, if you accept the critical text as being the more authoritative, then yes, of course, you would say that the King James Bible is more outdated, and we have updates within this critical text. Not everybody does accept the critical text. There are still scholars that believe that the Textus Receptus is the valid and authoritative line and underlying text. Like I say, I will openly admit that the majority of scholarship today does not hold to that view. But I'm not really even interested so much in making an argument for the Textus Receptus. The argumentation is really that you cannot just pick and choose which version of the Bible that you actually want to follow, as and when. As I say, it is not the only view for today. You have the Byzantine defenders, which will kind of assert that the Byzantine text is the predominant and reliable manuscript line that we have. Now, the King James Bible or the Textus Receptus would be predominantly Byzantine, but it is not always Byzantine. People get this wrong about the King James Bible, as if it is always the majority text and it is always the Byzantine. It is not. It is predominantly Byzantine and it is predominantly majority text, but it is not always. So when the Byzantine defenders, they will say that the Byzantine text is the correct one, they would disagree with the King James Version when the King James Version disagrees with the Byzantine text. If it goes away from the Byzantine defenders would disagree with the King James in that position. The same with the majority text proponents. Now, the majority text is not always the Byzantine. The vast majority of time it is, but it is not always the majority text is not always Byzantine. Sometimes it is not Byzantine. And so the majority text proponents would again, they would disagree with the Byzantine defenders when a majority text isn't Byzantine. And they would also disagree with the King James Bible position when that majority text is not held by the King James. Also, the majority text would disagree with modern critical text as well, because the modern critical text does not always hold to the majority view. It doesn't always hold to Alexandrian line, although it predominantly uses the Alexandrian line. It doesn't always. So there are differences in text criticism. Now, like I say, there's Textus Receptus advocates who believe that the Textus Receptus is the authoritative line, and then you have scholars that would be more eclectic, so they will pick and choose, not arbitrarily, but they will pick and choose from Byzantine, from the Textus Receptus majority, and the Alexandrian, the critical text. But like I say, it isn't just that they are going to pick and choose which one they think is the best suited for their theology. They're going to pick and choose based on a method that they are invoking and why they will select that particular reading. Now we have a selectively inconsistent approach within the apologetic side. They appeal to the critical text in one verse because it supports the theological argument that they're presenting. But then they will also, and this is on all sides. This isn't just, the Trinitarian or the Unitarian or the oneness or the Muslim or the atheist. This is all lines of arguments of apologists. When they're engaging in these debates, they are doing this. They are appealing to one and rejecting the other. But then they'll do that vice versa. And we're going to look at some examples where we'll see this. And the appeal to the oldest and best manuscripts. Could I restart? Unfortunately, Clate, I can't I'm not going to restart this one. I'm already into it, but you'll have to go back and listen to it. Nice to see you here, Clate, anyway. But but then, as I say, they'll defend the Textus Receptus when it's doctrinally helpful. They'll dismiss it where it's inconvenient. But they'll invoke the earliest manuscripts in one debate, in one verse, and then they'll appeal to a traditional reading in another. So this is this just happens within apologetics. Yeah, good, well done, Clay. Thanks for being here. Like I say, I appreciate everybody that is here, that is listening. Hopefully you'll get to learn something new, and the understanding of what is actually going on within these the apologetics at the moment. And we're, like I say, we are going to address some of this and look at some of the verses. Now, one of these is John 1:18. Now, what I've tried to do is try to look at a couple of verses that are really quite popular within debate scenes and well known within textual criticism. John 1:18 being one of the such verses that there's just one word that is different: theos or huios. Is it God or Son in John 1:18? Now, I'm not going to delve into what is the correct reading. I'm not. That isn't the purpose of this study today. What I want to do is just show you and highlight how these apologists are jumping from one to another, from one version to another. So in John 1:18, the critical text reads, "Only begotten God." That is the reading of the modern critical text. In your Nestle Aland 28 and 29 the edition, you will see the only begotten God, theos, being used in John 1:18. Now, prior to that, we used to see only begotten Son, and the King James reads only begotten Son. You'll still see a lot of modern versions who haven't updated as being the only begotten Son. All prior versions to the King James, the Geneva bishops, and prior, they read only begotten Son in this particular verse. The Textus Receptus reads only begotten Son. So what is happening here is that you will see an appeal to a particular reading in the critical text. Sometimes a Trinitarian, or even I've seen Muslims and atheists appealing to this verse to show the corruption, and they're going to argue on different sides. But what we'll see is some people arguing that the correct reading here should be only begotten God. And they will appeal to the fact that this is found in the oldest and best manuscripts. The oldest and best manuscripts being particularly Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus. And let me just scroll to where I would like to get to. So this is where that appeal to the oldest and best manuscripts comes in. That early Alexandrian witness that the modern critical text holds to have a lot of weight and a lot of authority. But then you'll see that the only begotten Son will be appealed to by certain groups, such as you'll see Unitarians use it specifically, arguing that this is that the only begotten Son is the correct reading. Now, this is the important thing. What you need to remember is the manuscripts that read only begotten God. Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus, the oldest and best manuscripts that people like to assert to. So when the Unitarian group is appealing to the correct reading of this, they are going to go against modern textual criticism. They are going to side with the position of the Textus Receptus, because the Textus Receptus reads only begotten Son. If you hold to the critical text and say that the critical text is the authoritative reading, is the authoritative original text that we go by, it is the closest, it goes back further, we're going to appeal to the oldest and best, then Unitarians cannot appeal to only begotten Son. They have to say that the only begotten God is the correct reading. The same for a Trinitarian that is arguing for this. They would say that the only begotten God is the correct reading. They can use this in an argument against a Unitarian. But a Unitarian would have to reject the oldest and best manuscripts. Now, I'm not saying personally that these are the oldest and best manuscripts. What I'm saying is that these are the manuscripts that are appealed to as being the oldest and best manuscripts. When you hear that argument being presented, this is what you are getting. So if you want to appeal to the oldest and best manuscripts in John 1:18, you have to say that the only begotten God is the correct reading. That is just your default position. If you're holding to the critical text, only begotten God is the correct reading. But that changes when we come to, this is the two readings that you'll find here. But this kind of changes when other versions or other verses are brought in. Now, let's go with 1 Timothy 3:16. God was manifest in the flesh, or he who was manifest in the flesh. Now, we have the reading A, God was manifest in the flesh. Now, this reading is, again, probably more appealed to by Trinitarians, that God was manifest in the flesh. This is the Textus Receptus reading. So what we'll see here is that the Trinitarian is going to appeal to the Textus Receptus reading, not the critical text reading that has he or who was manifest in the flesh. So they're going to now change their position from the critical text that they were using in John 1:18, but now they're going to switch, and they're going to go with the Textus Receptus. They're going to reject the manuscript tradition that they were appealing to. They're going to now follow the Textus Receptus reading in 1 Timothy 3:16. Now notice the Unitarian position. That's going to switch. They were appealing to the Textus Receptus reading in John 1:18, but now they're going to appeal to the critical text that has he who was manifest in the flesh. And again, I'm not arguing for which is the correct reading. That isn't the point of this. What the point is to highlight that those manuscripts that they were appealing to in one position, the scholarly position, or the modern critical text, this is what modern critical scholars believe. This is what the scholarship points to, is now rejected here, or accepted here and rejected there. That's what we see. The change from one version to another. Now, the King James Bible does read God was manifest in the flesh. There are other versions that read God was manifest in the flesh. The vast majority of versions read he who was manifest in the flesh, or who was manifest in the flesh, depending on the version that you're actually looking at. But this is Textus Receptus versus the critical text, but in the opposite way of John 1:18. So when somebody is saying to you, oh, the oldest and best manuscripts support a reading, but then they're not using that exact same argument that they were using in their next verse, that is selective scholarship. That's the misuse of the textual criticism. Because if you're following the Textus Receptus, then that, if that's what you believe to be the authoritative reading, the line that is authoritative, then you should be saying that in John 1:18 it says only begotten Son. But then you should also be consistent and say in 1 Timothy 3:16 that God was manifest in the flesh. Now, just because that causes a theological issue, if you don't know, if you can't understand that, that isn't a reason to change your position. Now, you can do that if you hold to an eclectic view, as I pointed out. You can point to an eclectic version reading and say, well, this is correct here and it's incorrect here. But now you have to go beyond the oldest, the best manuscripts, because that isn't supporting you in your own conclusions. You have to have a methodology of why you're selecting that reading and this reading. You can do that, but you have to have a reason why you're selecting that. And it cannot just be, well, in John 1:18 it suits my theology, and in 1 Timothy 3:16 it doesn't. So I'll choose the version or the reading that best suits my theology, because it's a theological choice, not based on evidence. That becomes your theological position. And you've now gone beyond textual criticism. You're not utilizing textual criticism anymore. You are making a theological choice. So let me get to, I don't know what the next slide is. I want to get to Jude 1:5, but before I do that, I just want to point out that I don't know if I've gotten this written down. The manuscript tradition of this and what each reading reads. Now, in 1 Timothy 3:16 there is no reading in Vaticanus, so people cannot utilize Vaticanus, but the reading is there in Sinaiticus, but we don't have the reading in we don't have a reading in Vaticanus because it doesn't contain that portion of 1 Timothy. So, and Sinaiticus would support that he who was manifest, or who was manifest in the flesh. So Sinaiticus is being utilized and not utilized as an authoritative manuscript source. Now, this becomes even more complicated when we get to Jude, because what we'll see is that there's a verse here, Jude 1:5, but there's also Jude 1:25 that we will need to address. Now, in Jude 1:5, the reading in your modern critical text will be that Jesus led the Israelites out of Egypt. So what we'll see here is that those that are Trinitarian are going to appeal to the critical text here. Now, they kind of accepted it and rejected it in those previous verses, and now we get another time when they're going to accept it. Now, Unitarians will say that Jesus is not the correct reading here, that the correct reading should be the Lord. Now, what you'll probably see is that they'll appeal to a version of the Bible that still has the reading the Lord, because Jesus has not always been the reading of the critical text in this verse. In the first 27 editions, it read the Lord. So any version of the Bible that was based upon the critical text at that point, utilizing any of those previous 27 editions, the reading would still be the Lord in there. But it was changed in the critical text in the 28th edition. And it now reads that Jesus led the Israelites out of Egypt. And that is still the reading of the 29th edition. So if you are going to appeal to the oldest and best manuscripts, then you're going to come into issues if you are trying to make the argument that the reading should be the Lord. Now, the oldest manuscript in this verse is actually P72, and it has a very strange reading of God Christ in Jude 1:5, which is not accepted by basically any version of the Bible. But that is the oldest reading that we have. So if we're going to appeal to the oldest reading, then God Christ should be the correct reading. But of course, that's not the reading that is accepted, because there are excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink. There are other forms of evidence that we look at. We're not just looking at the oldest and so-called best manuscripts. So if you just want to go with the oldest manuscript, then you have to accept that God Christ is the reading here. That should be your reading. But of course, that's not what people are going to go for. They're going to go for Jesus. That is the reading of Vaticanus. Vaticanus does read, is it, I've got that the wrong way around. I think Vaticanus in Jude 1:5. Bear with me 1 second. I keep forgetting. I keep mixing these up. Jude 1:5. It is so in Jude 1:5. Sinaiticus is the one that reads the Lord. No, it's not. I'm going to get this. I've got this confused. Let me get back to that in a second. But anyway, one of Vaticanus and Sinaiticus don't agree. I apologize. I've mixed those up in my head. But the point here is that Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus disagree in Jude 1:5. I've got this written down. I always mix these up. Yeah, it's because I had the Westcott and Hort in my head. Yeah, the Westcott and Hort text read Lord, which is the version, the reading of Sinaiticus. Sorry, so Lord is the reading of Sinaiticus. Jesus is the reading of Vaticanus. I had that correct. I confused myself. So Vaticanus and Sinaiticus don't agree here. So that becomes an issue. When you talk about Vaticanus and Sinaiticus being the oldest and best manuscripts, what do you do when they disagree with one another, which they do thousands and thousands of times? They don't agree with each other on thousands and thousands of times just in the Gospels alone. But again, the point that I'm trying to say is that that appeal to oldest and best manuscripts just doesn't work, especially in a verse like this, because those two manuscripts that were appealed to back or rejected back in John 1:18 are going to, they're split here. The reading is split. So which one are they going for? You can't just appeal to the oldest and best, especially as P72 does not agree with either one of these. And it certainly doesn't agree with any other manuscript. So it is the only manuscript that reads that particular reading in this verse. So this is what I'm just trying to point out, is that this selective textual criticism or that appeal to textual criticism just actually does not work within the apologetics framework, because it actually disproves itself when they're using it. Now, so as we see here, in John 1:18, the critical text reads only begotten God. But if you're going to follow the critical text, then you also have to say that he who was manifest in the flesh. You can't appeal to God was manifest in the flesh. Is he or who? Jude 1:5 is Jesus. So you'll see that Trinitarians will appeal to only begotten God or Jesus in these two verses, reject 1 Timothy 3:16 majority of the time, and they're going to go with God in here. But then you'll see Unitarians flip the other way round. So they're going to go with the Textus Receptus in John 1:18 and Jude 1:5, but then probably reject 1 Timothy 3:16 in that Textus Receptus tradition. So for me, that is not engaging in textual criticism. That's not appealing to the oldest and best manuscripts. That's not appealing to a tradition. That's just selecting the verse or the reading that you want to select, because it best suits what you want to put forward. Now, there does become a major issue. Now, I actually have this pointed out here. Only begotten God is supported by Vaticanus and Sinaiticus and P66 in John 1:18, and those are going to be appealed to your earliest and best manuscripts. Now, what you have to accept is that is the Alexandrian line reading. Now, the he who, which is supported by Sinaiticus in Timothy 3:16. So which are we accepting here? Are we going with the Sinaiticus in 1 Timothy 3:16? If you're selecting the Sinaiticus here, why have you rejected it in John 1:18? Or the opposite way round? Why have you accepted it in John 1:18, but now you're going to reject it in 1 Timothy 3:16? And the same with Jude 1:5 and Jesus. The Jesus is supported by Vaticanus and Alexandrinus. Again, Alexandrinus is another one of those manuscripts which is appealed to. Is a big codex. The early codex is going to be late 4th century, maybe into the early 5th century, depending on who's dating it. But it is, one of those big codexes that is accepted alongside of Vaticanus and Sinaiticus as being kind of the oldest and best manuscripts. Now, P66 is a papyri, as the same with P72. These are they're not full manuscripts, or they don't contain full amounts of the entire Bible. They contain portions of it. Or in some cases, like P52, it's only the size of a credit card. So it actually only really holds a tiny, tiny piece of the manuscript. But in Jude 1:5, what are we doing? Are we accepting Vaticanus? Are we accepting Sinaiticus? Sinaiticus reads Lord. So where are we changing? Where's the appeal to the oldest and best manuscripts? Where's the appeal to the scholars say? Well, scholars say that the only begotten God is the correct reading in John 1:18. If you're a Unitarian, you reject that. You reject the oldest and best manuscripts. You also reject modern textual criticism, and you reject modern scholars that would hold to that. But then you're going to appeal to them in other places, such as 1 Timothy 3:16. And the same with the Trinitarian, but it's the same with the atheist. It's the same with a Muslim who comes and says the oldest and best manuscripts, or such and such, whatever their reason for accepting or rejecting a particular verse or a particular reading. It's not the same. It has to remain the same. You have to have a reason why you are accepting or rejecting these manuscripts, why you are accepting a reading from the Textus Receptus, why you are accepting it from the critical text, why you are appealing to scholarship and then rejecting the scholarship. You have to have a reason. But the modern apologists who are engaging in these debates are not doing that. They're not engaging in textual criticism. It is a buffet for them to choose from. They are not being given two options that you can choose from. It's not you get to choose. You go to the buffet and you get to choose an apple or an orange. No, it is either apple or orange. One of them is wrong. Okay, you're not being given the choice of this. You're being given a reason why this is the correct reading and this one is the wrong reading. It's not that you just get to pick and choose which reading you want to pick and choose from. And you have to understand the reason why that reading was selected by that particular tradition. And if you want to pick an apple here and an orange here, then you have to have a reason for doing that. It has to have some kind of understanding of what you're doing when you are appealing to this particular reading. Why are you appealing to that reading? And I hear it so many times. Oh, the best and the oldest and best manuscript reads it in this verse. Scholarship says that this is the correct reading. And then that exact same argument is rejected by that exact same person elsewhere. And the selective of, the critical text and the Textus Receptus, the Septuagint, the Hebrew text, the Masoretic text, I hear it in debates as well. Oh, the Masoretic text reads this. The vowel pointing proves that it's this particular reading, and then they'll appeal. Oh, well, the Masoretic in another verse when it doesn't support them. Oh, well, the Masoretic text is a much later tradition. The vowel pointings weren't introduced until the 8th, 9th century, so they're not authoritative. Are they authoritative or are they not authoritative? When you're appealing to it, is the Hebrew authoritative or is the Greek Septuagint authoritative? All right. When you select one or the other, why are you selecting it? So, in Jude 1:25, this is really an interesting. This shows the difference just in the same manuscripts. In Jude 1:25, so the King James Version reads, "To the only wise God, our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forever. Amen." Okay, that's the Textus Receptus. But in the critical text, there's actually an extra word. There's extra wording. Now, what you'll see is that certain people will select this critical text reading because it best suits their theology. To the only God, our Savior, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Now that reading there does not appear in the textus receptus, but it is there in the critical text. So now we're going to appeal to the critical text as being the authoritative reading in Jude 125. In specifically Unitarians, they will appeal to, and I have seen this by certain Unitarians who will appeal to, through Jesus Christ, our Lord, in the critical text. But they've already rejected the critical text back just 20 verses earlier in Jude 1:5, when it read Jesus led the Israelites out of Egypt. So what are you doing? You're not engaging in textual criticism. You've just selected the reading that you want to accept. In the same book, 20 verses later, you've accepted it somewhere, you've rejected it in somewhere else. Now, what I actually have seen is that Trinitarians will then reject this verse or this reading in Jude 125, and they'll often appeal to versions such as the King James here in Jude 125. But why? Because it doesn't say through Jesus Christ. Because there's a separation in the critical text there to the only God, our Savior, through Jesus Christ. Well, that doesn't really suit the theological position. Now, I'm not saying that all will do that, but I have seen it done. But what you've done is you've picked and choose which reading you're going for in a particular verse. Now, I'm not going to go too much further because I've been going for an hour. I wanted to try and keep it that. I'm going to quickly go through the last of my slides without really delving too deep into it. And if you would like to come up and discuss, I will post the link if I can figure out how to do that. But I will try to present that in a moment. But Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, and P72 all support the reading of the critical text here through Jesus Christ, our Lord. So again, are you accepting or rejecting those manuscripts? What is it? When are you accepting them? Why are you accepting them? When are you rejecting them? Why are you rejecting them? It isn't a pick and choose. Now, as I say, in Jude 125, you'll often see that in Jude 1:5, early manuscripts appealed to or rejected, and then the same in Jude 125, you'll see either accepted or rejected, but the opposite way round normally. They are outcome-driven argumentations, right? They are based on the outcome of those textual criticism, the study of textual criticism, and the person who is not engaging in the textual criticism is just using them because they are outcome-driven, and they're using the outcome of that textual criticism, not engaging in the textual criticism itself. If the critical text supports that conviction, its authority is emphasized. If the textus receptus supports that conviction, traditional continuity is emphasized. If eternal scribal probability helps, it is highlighted. If it does not, it is quietly ignored. If the patristic evidence supports, it's appealed to. If it doesn't, it's rejected. If the Latin Vulgate or versional translations, the Peshitta and different, the Old Latin, the Latin Vulgate or the Ethiopic, when they support, they're appealed to. When they don't, they're rejected or they're not mentioned. This is what is happening within this the apologetic world, and you'll see it yourself. I'm sure you are aware of it. I'm sure you have seen this yourself. they'll point to that scribes frequently introduce doctrinal clarifications, or the earlier readings are to be preferred, that the more difficult reading is likely original. Well, that causes problems in certain verses. I'm sure that that people would be aware that Matthew 28:19, where Jesus commissions the disciples to go out and to baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that is a debated text. Yet it is in every single Greek manuscript that we have available to us. It is in 100% of all available Greek manuscripts. But there are still people that reject that reading. Why are they rejecting it? It's not based on manuscript evidence, but it is based normally on theological reasons, because they don't like the reading, because it doesn't align with a particular position that they have. Maybe it's a Unitarian Trinitarian position. Maybe it's the fact that they only want to baptize in the name of Jesus, and this verse actually becomes problematic for that. Maybe they can't work out why in the book of Acts or we only see baptism in the name of Jesus, and so it becomes, well, it must have been added in here, because otherwise there's an error, there's a contradiction. Well, are you rejecting it because you can't explain it, or is it based on any particular evidence why you would reject that? 1 John 5:7, often appealed to by certainly by Unitarians as being a verse that is being added to the text. Why are you rejecting that? What is it based on? Are you appealing to the critical text? Are you appealing to evidence? Are you what is it that you appeal to there? Have you looked at the evidence for that? There are just many verses that have these types of readings in them that are different. But then we come to even down to translational issues, like in Romans 9:5. Is Jesus God over all, or is he God blessed over all? Now, that is just that's not even a textual criticism issue. That is a translational issue. So there is more to it, to all of this, than just textual criticism. There's a lot of theological positioning being put forward in debates. So I just want to really point this out. Now, I'm going to go quickly through the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, switching authorities in the Old Testament. You'll often hear appeals to, well, the Greek text reads this, or the Hebrew text reads this because it supports. But then it will be, oh, well, the Greek text reads this because and it's more authoritative. The New Testament quotes it. Now there's issues with that as well, because if it's well known that there are places where now I'm not going to delve too much into it because it will delve into a deeper dive into that. But there are certainly places where even if the New Testament was quoting supposedly the Septuagint, there are many times that it doesn't, that it goes with the Masoretic text. Now that becomes problematic for those that are arguing that the Septuagint was the authoritative Bible that the New Testament writers were using, because if they and actually sometimes I actually hear that they only used the Septuagint because the Greek, the Hebrew wasn't in use then, or that was the Bible that they were using. Well, you have to then answer or explain why in certain places they did use the Hebrew. If they weren't using the Hebrew, why did they use the Hebrew in certain places? That doesn't make any sense. So that just becomes problematic when you make blanket statements and you just make these arguments without really understanding what is going on and why you need to delve deeper into it than just making these arguments. There's switching, like I say, between these versions. The Masoretic text is often said to be the authoritative over the Hebrew text. Oh, sorry, is the authoritative Hebrew text, but then what you'll see is that people delve into the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's for people that don't really engage in the topic. When I hear people talking about it, it's really hard to listen to sometimes, because it appeals to things that they don't really understand. The LXX is described as interpretive or secondary, but then it's appealed to as being authoritative in certain verses. I'll have a look at a couple of examples of those. Isaiah 9:6 and the appeal to the Septuagint here. When the messenger of great counsel, that becomes a convenient reading in Isaiah 9:6 in the Septuagint. So that is authoritative, of course, but then there are other times when it's not, and it would be rejected. The LXX is often used as support for the angel of the Lord Christology, or Christology. And it's appealed to that the LXX preserves an older textual traditions. The Greek renderings reflects a meaningful pre-Christian interpretive stream. The LXX phrase should shape Christological understanding. Now, this is not going to be something that is uniform. When the LXX says messenger of great counsel, and that supports the angel of the Lord Christology, it is emphasized. When the LXX diverges in ways that do not support a desired theological trajectory, its authority is frequently minimalized. The selective elevation of the LXX. Now, the deeper issue is, sorry, I'm not going to go too much further than this, actually. I think I've really just tried to point out. So I'm just going to kind of really conclude in a moment. The deeper issue, the problem is not one that one finds theological significance in the Septuagint. That's entirely legitimate to accept that. The problem arises when textual traditions are assigned authority based on theological convenience rather than consistent textual methodology. Textual criticism requires articulated principles. Why you are accepting the textus receptus, why you are accepting this, or the critical text, the LXX, or the Hebrew. When a translation is treated as evidence of a different base text, this must be articulated. When it is treated as interpretive, you have to understand, you have to explain why. What hierarchy governs the Masoretic text, the LXX, Dead Sea Scrolls, and other witnesses? Why are those being appealed to? Without those principles, the appeal becomes purely selective. And selective appeals, however persuasive, they undermine the methodology that is in place, and it reduces the credibility of it. Now, the deeper issue, sorry, I've done that. Let's just do the conclusion. I'm going to go into the conclusion of this, because I think I've gone long enough. I've put enough. I'm going to start repeating and just offering more examples of this. And I think I've stated enough what it is. So I'll just conclude with textual criticism is certainly just not a theological buffet for you to be able to pick and choose from. You cannot borrow manuscript authority when it helps and suspend it when it does not. If one adopts the Alexandrian priority as a principle, then you have to live with that. Its implications when it doesn't suit your position, even when those implications they complicate your theological position. Now, if one defends, as I do, the textus receptus as preserving the authoritative text, then I must be consistent and explain why I accept or reject a particular reading in a verse. Now, I do accept God was manifest in the flesh in 1 Timothy 3:16. Now, I also accept the only begotten Son. I also accept that the Lord led the Israelites out of Egypt. And I also don't utilize Jude 125 with through Jesus, because I hold to a particular position. And I'm not just going to jump in from one to another, because it causes me a little bit of discomfort when a reading seems to go against me. And I'm not going to just go, oh, I'm going to use the critical text here because it sounds good and it helps my position. And I don't jump from versions. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not using other versions in arguments. I'm highlighting and showing what another version might use, but I don't appeal to that as my kind of authority. I'm not jumping from one version to another. Now, when a version does differ in a reading, but the underlying text is the same, now that's slightly different, and you still have to engage in why you are appealing to, say, the NASB instead of the NIV if you're following the critical text, because you can't just turn around and say, well, it sounds better in this particular version. You have to say, well, the Greek it brings out the Greek more. Why does it bring out the Greek more? What is the Greek in that verse? What is it that is bringing out? You have to understand all of this if you're going to jump from one to another. It has to be, your position has to be grounded in a consistent method. You have to understand the method that has produced that reading. It isn't for you to just pick and choose. That's what the point of this is. Now, in the end, the issue is not whether one is Trinitarian, Unitarian, Muslim, atheist, oneness, whatever position you're holding. That isn't the main issue here. The main issue is what is the reason why you are accepting or rejecting a verse? Why are you accepting the critical text, the Textus Receptus, the Latin Vulgate, whatever reading it is that you're accepting? What is it that makes you accept that reading? And why are you accepting it here and not accepting it in another verse? This needs to be explained. Unfortunately, I truly believe that modern apologists who are engaging in these debates do not understand the underlying positions, the methodology that is utilized by scholars in order to produce these readings. And so they are just using it as if it is just something that they can pick and choose and select, when unfortunately that is not what what textual criticism is set out to do. Whether you are holding to that modern text, modern critical texts, scholars who hold to the critical text are not saying, oh, well, in John 1:18, the correct reading here, it theologically supports our position, so we'll hold it there. But in Jude 1:5, it's not. They are holding to the critical text in every place that's the reading. So in John 1:18, they are saying that God is the correct reading. In John, in 1 Timothy 3:16, they're saying he is the correct reading, or who is the correct reading. In Jude 1:25, they are saying that the correct reading is through Jesus. in Jude 1:5, they're saying that the correct reading is that Jesus led the Israelites out of Egypt. So that is consistent. Whereas the opposite would be with the Textus Receptus. They would appeal to different readings based on the methodology that created that particular reading. So to finish off, when you see these apologists engaging in this kind of appeal to readings, what you'll see is that really they are engaging in just theological argumentations. They are basing their appeal to a particular reading on their theological position. It isn't really an appeal to textual criticism. It isn't really an appeal to the oldest and best manuscripts. It isn't really an appeal to scholarship. It is an appeal to what best suits my theological position, and let me choose that one and reject the other. And they are using the textual criticism, and you'll often see them saying, oh, well, scholars say, or, but this is just what they're engaging in to support their theological belief, and that will then be rejected elsewhere. So I'm going to finish there. If I can figure out how to allow people to come up, I'm sure. There you go. I've managed to find it. So if you would like to come up, you are more than welcome to do so. It has to remain on topic. I'm not going to go for a huge amount of time. If you have any questions on textual criticism, or if there's anything that I've brought up today that you want clarification on, feel free. I'll engage in that. You're more than welcome to come up. But like I say, it is not going to be a debate on any kind of theology. It is going to be based on textual criticism. If you've got anything to say on that, more than happy to engage in it. And if you have your own understanding of what is going on, Freddie, you have your camera on. Do you want to keep it on? You're more than welcome to keep it on. You can turn it off. I'm going to bring you up. So there we go. Freddie is up. Now, for viewers that are new to, you're muted, Freddie. Just let you know.
Oh, I'm muted. Well, either way. Yeah, I don't mind my camera on because yours is off. So
no, that's good. Now, for viewers that are maybe only aware of my channel, I engage regularly on Freddie's channel. He has his own YouTube channel. You are more than welcome to post that in the link, Freddie, if you want to do that. Actually, you might have access. You might be allowed to do that. You're a moderator, so you should be able to.
No big deal.
To post that into the link, into the comments. Now, Freddie, like I say, has his own channel. He engages on a regular basis, daily, almost at a daily basis, with people of and all types of discussions on his channel. And Freddie is there for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at a time, allowing people to come up and just discuss different topics. Freddie is a dear friend of mine, a very important person in my studies, because I engage on Freddie's channel a lot, and there are lots of different people on there with different theological beliefs, and we engage all the time on different topics, different discussions. And there are people there that challenge me on many different topics that I maybe don't know, and I have to go and study those particular things. So Freddie is a dear friend of mine. So the first time that he's been here on my channel. So I'm going to introduce those that do watch my channel to Freddie. Please do go and support him on his channel. Go and like and subscribe his, and you will see me there as well. So you get me and Freddie at the same time. So I do thank you for coming up, Freddie, and supporting the channel.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the kind words. And I was on Water twice, maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, maybe you did actually.
Yeah.
When I was doing more videos,
doing quite a bit of the
I was
lives.
allowing people up.
Yeah, this would be like right after Flow we were all on Flow, and then we were going elsewhere.
Yeah. So,
but I would frequent yours and listen quite a bit, and then got the nerve to kind of click the link and come up once in a while when you offered the link like you're doing now.
Well, like I say, I appreciate you being here. Now, I know that you haven't engaged massively in the textual criticism side, but what is kind of from what I've said today? Do you kind of agree, disagree with what I've said? Have you kind of noticed this yourself? Is it something that you see as an issue? Maybe I'm chomping at something that doesn't really mean anything to some people, but I'd be interested in your point of view.
Well, first of all, very, very good job of your presentation. Another good job, and well informed. I do agree with you, and some of the things you said help to confirm what some of the things I've already had a feeling, more of a feeling, kind of a spiritual feeling. For example, you and Lloyd confirmed to me about the Septuagint, the LXX. I never believed that it was before Jesus, just something within me. And I never studied it. I've never even read the Septuagint. It's only from hearing about it. And people saying, "Oh, Jesus is quoting the Septuagint," and that never sat well with me. It didn't make any sense. And so when I heard you and Lloyd 2 separate times confirm that and say, "No, it wasn't before Jesus. Jesus never quoted," I just, I was just relieved. It was like, yes, more confirmation. And I put a lot of trust in you and Lloyd in your studies. I've listened to you a long time, and Lloyd now nearly a year. Listen to what he has to say, and both of you very sharp men, and you a lot of credit to both of you. You put hard work into what you're studying, and by the way, if people want to buy him a coffee for this, I mean, he puts a lot of work and time into it. So, and but what you do is very educating. It's informing us. And again, we talked earlier, and I neglected to write things down as you were going. I was thinking, oh yeah, that's a good one, I'll remember that. But I had like 5 things, and then I go, what was those first 3 again? And then I started writing things down. But what do you say about, because I started writing down, the Geneva is translated from the Textus Receptus, right?
Yeah. So the Geneva is based on basically the same text,
and the KJV, right?
Near enough the same.
Pretty
text.
close, from my understanding.
Yeah.
What I find fascinating is a lot of the King James naysayers like the Geneva, and from my encounter, and I'm thinking, well, why? Everything in the Genevas is like what's in the King James, and the Geneva came first. So how would you respond to that, to people that are against the KJV, yet it's very similar to the Geneva?
To the Geneva, yeah. I find that strange myself, is that they will turn around and say, that this isn't uncommon, actually. I don't think that, they'll appeal and say, oh, the King James Bible is, we've got so much better since then. and then they will appeal to the Geneva that preceded it, and actually is based on virtually the same manuscripts or the same text. And actually, I don't know if people realize that is the case. I honestly don't know if people realize that all of those prior Bibles, they'll go back to, or the Tyndale Bible or something, that is based on the Textus Receptus. Now, a much earlier Textus Receptus, I will grant that, the Erasmus Textus Receptus. Now, this is, without going too far deep into it, but we get Erasmus, we get Stephanus, and we get Beza, who all update the Textus Receptus. So it kind of does on a progression scale. So there are many versions of the Textus Receptus. It's not just one version of it. There are many versions, like there is in the critical text. There's not just one version of the critical text. But I do wonder if people actually realize that when they're appealing to the Geneva Bible, that actually the vast majority of those readings in the Geneva Bible are the ones that are in the King James as well. So the Geneva Bible will read the only begotten God. The only begotten Son, but it will read God was manifest in the flesh in 1 Timothy.
And so, like you, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I have no issue.
I don't have a problem with that because I've never, even when I struggled, because I never was a Trinitarian, I never was a oneness, obviously, but my upbringing was where I was struggling with Jesus as God, because that was the belief, that was the teaching, being raised Catholic. And that's the odd thing too, being Catholic and not believing in the Trinity. But I just simply believed that God was manifested in Christ, not that God was that same thing for in John 1:14, because I was reading, well, Jesus says the Father's in me, but like the belief, well, he's not really the Father, but he's God. So that's where I struggle. Okay, the Father's in him, but he's still God. But it doesn't make sense. So that's why but it was easy. Now I'm so comfortable with it with 1 Timothy 3:16. It's easy. It's just God is just manifested. It doesn't mean he became flesh. He's just like Jesus, just presenting God in his character.
Yeah. And so for people, we don't need to pick and choose. Now, some people, like I say, they may appeal to he was manifest in the flesh, and that's fine. But I still believe that they need to have the methodology behind accepting it. I just want to, before you carry on with any more of those points, Clayt, you said you were interested in knowing about why they changed. I presume you're talking about the Jesus in Jude 1:5. Now, there isn't any difference in evidence in that position from the edition 27 to 28. There's nothing new found that's a kind of supported that. The Vaticanus and Sinaiticus were available prior to that, but it was felt by whoever the committee at that particular time. See, that's a thing when you're going through many editions of the critical text, you have different people that are engaging in the issues. So when they're looking, so somebody 50 years ago is looking at the evidence and they're deciding one thing, and 50 years later you have another panel that are looking at the evidence and saying, actually, we disagree with that original conclusion that they came up with, and we're going to change that. Now, sometimes that is based on new evidence, that new things are found. Certainly, when we got the Dead Sea Scrolls and they started to get analyzed that, and the papyri that were found, that did bring a new viewpoint on and other new evidence into the equation. When the 28th edition of the Nestle-Aland text was produced, and they changed the Lord to Jesus in that verse, that was not based on any new evidence. That was just based on the fact that they had looked at the evidence and decided that that reading Lord that was there for the 27 editions actually isn't the correct reading, and it should be changed to Jesus. Now, one of the reasons why, and Bruce Metzger, who, if people who are aware of textual criticism, actually says or said that the reading Jude in Jude, Jesus, is to the point of impossibility, which is why it's selected as true. It's almost impossible that this would be the correct reading, so it must be the correct reading. That makes no sense. They go with the more difficult reading. Now, that for me is a ridiculous argument. The more difficult reading, for me, makes no sense that would be the correct reading. You would go with the easier. Oh, well, no, somebody wouldn't change the Lord to Jesus but yes, they would. If there's a theological reason behind that, if you want to insert Jesus into the Old Testament, there's a place that you can do that. So there is a theological reason why you would change the word Lord to Jesus. So you have to look at beyond just the evidence. What is there theological reasons why somebody would do that? And what we do see is that, like I say, Codex Vaticanus, which was always available to the critics, has always read Jesus in that verse, and Sinaiticus has always read the Lord in that verse. And Sinaiticus was accepted over Vaticanus even by Westcott and Hort, who read that the Lord led the Egyptians out of led the Israelites out of Egypt. So even Westcott and Hort, who held to Codex Vaticanus being kind of that authoritative manuscript, they almost predominantly used Vaticanus. Here they rejected Vaticanus and went with Sinaiticus. So yes, Clay, the reason why is because they presume, or they assume now, that that is a better reading, and a more original reading is harder reading. Somebody's less likely to change it from Lord to Jesus, which I actually disagree with. I think it's actually more likely that somebody would change it from Lord to Jesus for theological reasons. But yeah, that's your answer, Clay. That is why you'll see that change in the 28th edition.
Tell me, I hope this isn't off topic, but it's based on what you were saying on Lord, and I did this slight little study myself, not thorough, but you tell me. In the Greek, the word for Lord, kurios, right? But there's like three. I noticed there's kurion, kurios, kurio, or so there's like three different.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So those are different endings of the same word. It's just the way that it is.
Right. But what I noticed when I was checking into it, when it was Lord for God, it was a different kurion, whatever, than when it was always for Jesus. I noticed that. And I was wondering if it was really that of a big noticeable thing to determine that they used a certain spelling of kurios for God when they knew it was supposedly the name of God, and they just still put Lord. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, but I would say no. because the endings of words really are affected not by who's in play, but really the meaning of it, and determined by the grammar of it. And I think it works the same in Spanish and other languages. Well, certainly in Czech, as I know, you'll see the endings of words, they change from whether it's the same word becomes masculine or feminine or neuter, and that's what happens in the Greek. Is you'll see endings change by possessive, genitive, different dative. The grammar changes the endings of the words. So I wouldn't I don't think that would be too much of an argument. Certainly within a Trinitarian argument would not kind of accept that one as an argument of when theos or theon is being used in the Greek.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably have to go through and make a more detailed look at that, but yeah, I think you'll find that it's just based on the grammar of the particular verse. I breezed through the Douay Rheims and it reads almost identical to the Geneva and the KJV, apart from a few words. I've always found that very suspicious, considering they were coming from text. Well, the Douay Rheims is kind of a counter Reformation Bible by the Catholics, and actually there are many disagreements between the Douay Rheims and the King James Bible. Many differences. But one thing I will say, just quickly point out, is that if you get a Nestle-Aland text, you can buy them physical ones. In the front there, it will actually tell you that the United Bible Society, the Nestle-Aland United Bible Society, are working alongside the Catholic Church to produce this text. It is under kind of the approval of the Catholic Church. So, yeah. Let me read that again. It reads almost identical to the Geneva and KJV, considering they were coming from the same texts. Yeah, the Douay Rheims is not translated from the Textus Receptus. The Douay Rheims is based upon kind of I believe that the Douay Rheims is based upon the Clementine. I might be wrong on that. I might be wrong on that, but I believe that the Douay Rheims is based upon the Clementine Vulgate. So there's a more modern Vulgate than the one that Jerome did. So we have obviously the 4th century Jerome Vulgate, but then we have a more modern one, the Clementine one, and they do slightly disagree. One thing I will point out is that the King James Bible is not based upon the on Codex on the Vulgate. I've heard that's one of the reasons why 1 John 5:7 is in the King James Bible, because it is in the Latin Vulgate. That is wrong. That is not the reason why the 1 John 5:7 is in the Textus Receptus. But yeah, sorry, Freddie, was there anything else that you?
No, not really.
To bring up.
what you just said now, 1 John 5:7, of course, that never bothered me. It's not a Trinity proof text. It's not three persons there. As you know, I always believe the Word is God Himself. The Spirit is God. It's His power. We see the Spirit was a witness when it came down and came upon Jesus as a dove, and the Word testifies itself. Jesus speaking the Word, and the Father dwelling in Him. So it's all three. God is there representing Himself within His Spirit and His Word. So I just see that. So whether it was, people want to argue whether it was added later, I don't know for sure. I've never studied it, but I don't have a problem. Just like you, I don't have a problem with it. As you know, I grew up in the King James, and I'm good with it.
Yeah.
And then just one last thing before I go.
Yeah.
Gotta go, is I've always felt with the books that's been collated to make up what we see as the Bible, and some of these various translations, I've always just felt God was in control to make sure that with the books we have are the books that God made sure, however He did it, however all these men were inspired. I believe all the books were in the churches of God at that time, and the reason they were able to get them, the Roman Empire controlled all that region. They controlled that place where all the churches were in Asia Minor, and all the books were there. So it was easy just to kind of, as I say, kind of confiscate them all and just get them and put them together. So it wasn't like they, 200-300 years later, the so-called Catholic Church, canonized to make the Bible. They were already there, written by the apostles. They didn't write anything like people want to. They want to allude to the church fathers, so-called early church fathers, and other people. Oh, they wrote and put the books together, made them up. No, they were already there. But anyways, that's just my little bit. But
Yeah. And I fully agree. That's a topic of its own, about the canon and stuff. But I agree. All of those books were written early. They were all authoritative early. And they are authoritative because they are God inspired. They are not authoritative because the Catholic Church decided that they were authoritative. Now, whether the Catholic Church compiled them or not is another thing, but the books themselves are authoritative because they are God inspired, and that is the reason why they are authoritative. And I'll just quickly jump back to 1 John 5:7, because I have done studies on 1 John 5:7 on here, and I've had guests up talking about 1 John 5:7 in great detail, sorry, Clayt, I haven't got Rumble open. I don't know if you could copy and paste that into Rumble. If you could do that, that'd be awesome for me. Otherwise, I'd have to go and open it up, and I haven't actually done that. I haven't even looked on Rumble. I forget that I'm streaming to both. I always forget that I'm actually doing Rumble as well as YouTube. But yeah, the 1 John 5:7. So whether you accept it or you reject 1 John 5:7 is another thing. I understand why people reject 1 John 5:7, and I do. I'm not even going to make the argument that it is authoritative, even though I do believe that it is. But one thing that I have noticed about 1 John 5:7 is that the vast majority of people that argue against it are not appealing to actual evidence of it. They're misrepresenting the evidence. They don't know the evidence of it. Oh, Erasmus only had 6 manuscripts. False. Erasmus made a bet that if that manuscript was produced, that he didn't have a manuscript, and for his first 2 editions, he didn't include it, which is correct. He didn't include it in his first 2 editions. He does add to it in the 3rd. but he makes no bet. There is no bet. Bruce Metzger retracted his argumentation on that. That was disproven by a Dutch Erasmian study. De Jong disproved that there was no bet. So what happens is that myths arise, they get put forward and postulated, and then they're spread and put forward to people, and people copy them. They don't actually check whether that myth is correct or not. It's then copied and pasted and put forward, and then it just becomes truth, as if that is what was correct. And you get then what I've even noticed about scholars is that they will copy another scholar. They're not going and have a looking the evidence themselves. They will copy and paste a scholar. Bruce Metzger did this on numerous occasions where he corrected himself when he said, "Oh, somebody, this particular fact," he then corrects himself when he goes and checks it. And he actually states that he corrects himself because he goes and studies. But that still happens today. Scholars repeat the information that other scholars say as if that is a fact. And it gets spread. And today, modern scholarship is following, is really grounded in this oldest and best manuscript tradition. Now, although today modern scholars don't really go with that line themselves, the fact is that the groundwork has already been done, and people do kind of say that the Alexandrian line is the authoritative line, and that stems from the oldest and best manuscripts, because at that time, when that was stated by Westcott and Hort, the Alexandrian line, the Vaticanus and the Sinaiticus were the oldest manuscripts. Now, whether they were the best is another thing, but they were the oldest. But now that kind of has been disproven. The best, anyway. There are many times when they certainly are not the best, but they're no longer the oldest. We have many new manuscripts that have been found. Now, the thing is that the vast majority of manuscripts that we have found since the introduction of the Westcott and Hort text in 1880 actually support the readings of the Textus Receptus. The vast majority of those are supported. They support the Textus Receptus. So when people appeal and say, "Oh, we've got all this new evidence," yes, it supports the Textus Receptus and the King James Bible. All of those manuscripts or the vast majority of them, those manuscripts that support the Alexandrian line, the critical text, they were already available. And actually, what the finding of the papyri actually proved many of the assertions that were made about the Byzantine text to be false. It was asserted that the Byzantine text, that the vast majority underlines the King James reading, was a later production. That's been proven false. That was the Lucian recension. That was something that they argued that that the Byzantine text is a production of the Alexandrian and the Western text put together and produced this Byzantine text. So it cannot be original because it's a combination of these two texts. The papyri showed that false, because we have Byzantine readings that shouldn't have been available prior to the Lucian recension in the 3rd, 4th century that are available back in the papyri that predate Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. So a lot of the assumptions that were made and assertions which were made have been proven false. Unfortunately, the the conclusions are still held to, even if the foundations have been removed. The roof is still there. Unfortunately, the roof hasn't collapsed yet, but the foundations are falling, and eventually that roof will fall. But they're supported by a lot of textual criticism at the moment. But one day, as that is shown more and more false, these arguments, it will collapse. Jonathan, wow, long time no speak, sir. Thank you very much for being here. I do appreciate you being here. Yeah, I do appreciate your being here. Freddie,
I'll be heading out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for being here. I do appreciate.
Right. God bless.
Freddie for being here. When was the Clementine Vulgate written? 1592, I believe. Don't know. When were the Douay Reims? Maybe the Douay Reims is not based upon that. Maybe I think the Douay Reims was earlier than that. Must be earlier than that. Yeah. LJ, if Jesus was revamped Roman Baal sun god, would you agree your background picture reflects this? If people were deceived into Baal worship by the rulers, is this not how it would be done? Well, I don't agree that Jesus was a revamped Roman Baal sun god. Now, I understand some of the arguments that are presented for that, and maybe we can address those on another particular live. But no, I don't believe that. And actually, if you notice my images, when I do create, Jonathan, it is good to. I'm glad that you're here. If you want to come up, feel free to click the link. If it's possible for you to come up, you're more than welcome here. I do appreciate you dropping by, even if you're just listening in. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate everybody that comes and listens to the studies that I do and the presentations that I do, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with me. I appreciate it. I only present the information and my beliefs. I put forward my beliefs, my studies that I present. I don't tell anybody that you have to believe what I'm saying, that you have to agree with what I'm saying. But I would encourage everybody to at least look into the things that are stated. And if you disagree, have a good reason why you disagree. And that goes for all different things. Now, if you are a critical text person, that's fine. You don't have to be a King James person like me. You don't have to follow the Textus Receptus. I have no problem with that. If that's and you can disagree with me. Be convicted by your own studies yourself. Understand why you have that position. Don't just hold to a position. Understand why. Now, quickly going back, if you notice, I tried to stay away from creating Jesus in any kind of form that highlights facial features or ethnicity, or I obviously depict him as a man, but I tried to stay away from that because I don't know what Jesus looked like, and I'm not going to try to make an image of Jesus. So what color he was, I've done argumentations about Jesus being black and Jesus being white. I don't believe that Jesus Christ was a white man like me walking around the earth 2,000 years ago. I don't believe that. So I try to stay away from visual images that are very much driven by the Catholic Church and, you know, the long-haired, blue-eyed white man. I stay away from images like that. I'd rather kind of portray him as a more glorified image in the brightness of it. Truth is, I don't know what Jesus looked like, and I wouldn't try to make an image that of him for the facial features. It's maybe not something I've always believed or done, but I wouldn't create that kind of image now. I wouldn't use that by my own creation. So yeah, and I agree with that 100%. Actually, it doesn't matter how Jesus looked. It's important what that he believed and how he behaved. That is the importance of it. So yeah, I don't try to portray Jesus as looking like any particular ethnicity or way. Just that he was a person. He was a man that lived. He was the Messiah. He died, was buried, and resurrected. These are things that I fundamentally believe. But yeah, and I agree with that 100% as well. The Catholic Church portrays Jesus as a sun god. I agree. I do think that the Catholics do that, you know, with that halo around his head. That isn't a depiction of the glorified Jesus, because we see this around the saints, we see it around Mary and stuff like that. It's on the human. So yeah, sun god, obelisks, sun discs, wafers. Yeah, I agree, and I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't agree with the cross as an ancient sun symbol. The cross is fundamental to, I believe, that is fundamental to the death of Jesus. So yeah, there are certain things that I definitely agree with, and there are things that obviously I would disagree with. But I do agree that Jesus is portrayed in certain aspects as being kind of pagan, which I wouldn't hold to. So and I wouldn't use them. So yeah, I'm gonna unless anybody would like to come up or there's any more kind of questions or discussion regarding textual criticism, which is what I'm engaging in. We've been going for 2 hours, so I would kind of finish here. Dennis, I do appreciate you being here as well. It's a long time since we've spoken. I appreciate you being here. I know it's probably late for you, but thank you very much for being here. Again, I appreciate everybody that has stayed, listened, disagreed, agreed. The point of this study was not to make an argument for that you have to believe in any particular reading, any particular text. That wasn't the point that I presented here. The point was that I wanted to kind of highlight the this kind of thing that modern apologists are engaging in. That's it. It's just to show and highlight that jumping from one version from one text to another is not engaging in the evidence. It is not engaging in textual criticism. It is not using textual criticism. It is abusing it. So I just wanted to make that point, to bring that point out and show how it really kind of goes against them. Mark 16:9, for example. What are we going with Mark 16:9? Are we going with the majority text, what scholars say, the oldest and best? Because if you're going by oldest and best, you're going by Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, then Mark, the last 12 verses of the Gospel of Mark, are they're not authoritative. They're not part of the text. They're not there in Sinaiticus or Vaticanus. So what are we doing? How are we engaging in this? Well, are you accepting Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, P72? What are you engaging in? Patristic evidence, internal evidence? Are you looking at all of that? And that's all that I wanted to bring out and show that, and hopefully people can see that modern textual criticism and modern apologetics are not engaging in the same thing when invoking a reading. It is not utilized in the same way. It is not produced in the same way. One is done by producing a text from evidence, and the other one is based on a theological point of view. So, like I say, unless anybody would like to come up and just discuss this, or anybody has another question, I will say goodnight, and I will say thank you very much for being here. I do appreciate it. It means a lot that people are here and engaging in the channel. So as Freddie pointed out when he came up, I do put a lot of effort into these, whether you agree or disagree. The effort is there, and I'm just trying to put forward information for you to make up your own mind, and that is important, that we are convicted by our own mind, and we are looking at the full evidence when we come to our conclusions. So after 2 hours, I will say thank you very much, appreciated. I will finish. It will finish with a song. The songs that you hear here are produced by me. They are available on my channel. You can go and have a look. There are, I think, something like 38 different songs available on my channel. They're all, like I say, produced by me. The words, the vast majority of the words are written by me as well. I don't produce the music. I'm not a musician, so I do use AI for that. But a lot of the lyrics of it have come from kind of poems that I've written in the past, or things that I have studied and I'm looking at, and I put together. So if you appreciate the music, you can go and view that on my channel. There are many different studies on my channel. I have quite a lot of different studies that I've already done in the past, and I will be producing more in the future. Like I say, they're kind of all different types of topics, and not just on textual criticism or Unitarianism, Trinitarianism, all different types of topics. I do them on contradictions. I have done some on contradictions. I've done them on the Hebrew Israelite argumentations, even down to, what color was Jesus. So I have done those in the past. Whether Jesus was a sun god, I have actually, if you have a look, I've done 3 detailed studies looking at the argumentations of the Zeitgeist video and the video, the book produced by Akaria S. So I did 3 very detailed studies on those. I will repeat those at some point because I'm getting back into it. So look out for those, and I will produce those in the future. You can see me on Freddie's channel. So if I will try to post that into the description at some point. So if anybody would like to go to Freddie's channel and help him and support him there, he goes live regularly for 6-7 hours at a time. So go there, give him a like. Please like and subscribe here to be kept up to date with new studies. You are welcome, like I say, regardless of whether you agree or disagree. And I will now finish and play. Will now play one of the songs that I produced. Hopefully you will like it, and I'll see you on my next study. Haven't decided exactly what that might be, but I am looking probably Sunday, if not next Wednesday, I will do a study. So appreciated that you're here. Thank you very much. Please do give the video a thumbs up, because it does help with the algorithms and all of that kind of stuff. So thank you. Shalom. Good night.
When the way gets dark and narrow, when the river starts to rise, I remember every promise you have never left my side. When my courage feels so fragile and my questions fill the room, you are steady, you are present, you are speaking through the gloom. You are faithful, you are true. Every breath I lean on you. You are mercy, you are just. Every day I choose to trust. When I'm breaking, when I stand, I am steady in your hands. You are faithful, you are true. God, I'm holding on to you. When I feel the same old pattern, when my shame is loud again, you don't turn away in anger. You call me your child, your friend. In the silence of my doubting, you are working still unseen. You bring justice for the broken, and your kindness carries me. You are faithful, you are true. Every breath I lean on you. You are mercy, you are just. Every day I choose to trust. When I'm breaking, when I stand, I am steady in your hands. You are faithful, you are true. God, I'm holding on to you. You were there in every valley, oh yeah, you were there on every height. You will be there when I'm finished. You will lead me through the night. All my future, all my failures, all my heart is in your plan. I can rest in this forever. You will never drop my hand. You are faithful, you are true. Every breath I lean on you. You are mercy, you are just. Every day I choose to trust. When I'm breaking, when I stand, I am steady in your hands. You are faithful, you are true. God, I'm holding on to you.